The observation deck of the Galactic Council diplomatic ship was quiet save for the gentle hum of life support systems. Suspended in orbit around Earth, the vessel provided an unparalleled view of the blue-green planet slowly rotating below. Its oceans glittered under sunlight, clouds swirled in delicate patterns across its atmosphere, and the lights of human civilization twinkled across its night side like scattered diamonds. Ambassador Yolan of the Kelry stood transfixed before the massive viewport. Her form, a semi-translucent collection of tentacles and sensory appendages radiating from a central mass, pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her fascination. The Kelry were a species evolved from communal marine organisms, their entire civilization built upon principles of symbiotic relationships and collective harmony. Violence, as humans understood it, was virtually unknown in their evolutionary history. "It looks so peaceful," Yolan remarked, her voice a melodious vibration that the ship's systems translated into standard galactic speech. One would never guess what lies beneath those clouds. Behind her, Zareth of the Virex nodded. His scaled, bipedal form was rigidly poised, hands clasped behind his back. The Virex were one of the oldest species in the Council, with a history that had once paralleled humanity's in many ways, a history of conflict, conquest, and eventual self-mastery. Unlike most Council members, the Virex understood humans in ways others could not. That is precisely why this observation is mandatory for all new Council ambassadors, Zareth said. His voice was deep, each word carefully measured. What you see with your outer senses tells only a fraction of the story. Yolan's tentacles rippled with a pattern that indicated confusion. I've studied the briefing materials extensively, but I must confess, I still don't understand why Earth warrants such special attention. There are thousands of worlds with sapient life in our records. What makes this one so significant that every ambassador must observe it personally? Zareth's scaled lips curled into what might have been interpreted as a smile. Follow me to the holographic chamber. There is something you need to witness firsthand. The holographic chamber was a minimalist space, a perfect sphere with walls of matte black material that could transform into any environment, any scene from across the galaxy. As they entered, the room darkened completely before being filled with pinpoints of light, stars, galaxies, nebulae, creating the impression that they floated in the void of space itself. "Computer," Zareth commanded, "initiate Earth biological history sequence. Comprehensive view." The stars swirled and coalesced, transforming into a representation of the early Earth, a molten, chaotic sphere bombarded by asteroids and cosmic radiation. As Yolan watched, the hologram accelerated through time. Oceans formed. The first primitive cells appeared. What many species fail to grasp, Zareth began, is that Earth was never gentle. From its very inception, it was a crucible. The hologram showed microscopic organisms, primitive bacteria-like forms floating in ancient seas. "Look closely," Zareth instructed. Even at this stage, Yolan's sensory appendages focused on the display. The primitive cells weren't merely existing alongside one another. They were consuming each other, engulfing, destroying. The stronger devouring the weaker. Predation existed before complex life even evolved, Zareth noted. On most Council worlds, early life forms developed symbiotic relationships, sharing resources, developing collective structures. On Earth, the first evolutionary advantage was the ability to consume another living thing. The hologram accelerated. Plants appeared, spreading across land masses, but even they weren't the peaceful organisms Yolan might have expected. They developed toxins after the Great Extinction Event. Primates appeared, using tools, developing larger brains, not primarily to cooperate, but to outsmart competitors and prey. "Did you know," Zareth asked, "that the Council once seriously debated sterilizing this world? Long before humans achieved spaceflight or even industrial technology." Yolan's form contracted in shock, her bioluminescence flickering erratically. "That would violate our most sacred principles. The Council exists to protect life, not exterminated. Indeed, and yet the vote was called. Zareth's expression remained impassive. 3,247 years ago, by your reckoning. The motion to intervene failed by a narrow margin. On what possible grounds could such an action have been justified? Yolen demanded, her normally melodious voice sharpening with indignation. The council ethicists argued that intelligent predators pose an existential threat to galactic harmony. Their reasoning was that any species with both high intelligence and an evolutionary history of predation would inevitably bring warfare and conquest to the stars. The hologram had progressed to early human civilizations, stone tools giving way to bronze, then iron. Cities rising, falling, burning. Armies marching across continents. I don't understand, Yolen said, her appendages drawing closer to her central mass, a Kelry expression of distress. Intelligence requires cooperation. The capacity for abstract thought, for language, for social structures. These things arise from the need to work together. That is true for 16 paths, Zareth corrected. But humanity followed the 17th. They evolved intelligence not primarily to cooperate, but to compete more effectively. Their brains grew larger to outwit their prey, to anticipate the movements of animals they hunted, to coordinate attacks. Later, those same cognitive abilities were turned against each other. The hologram displayed scenes of human warfare through the ages, spears and shields, bows and arrows, cavalry charges. Then gunpowder weapons, tanks, aircraft dropping bombs. They kill their own kind, Yolen whispered. Extensively, Zareth confirmed, and with extraordinary creativity. The display showed the mushroom clouds of atomic weapons rising over human cities. Nuclear submarines lurking in ocean depths. Intercontinental ballistic missiles primed to deliver death across vast distances. No wonder the Council considered intervention, Yolen said. If they had achieved spaceflight with this mentality, that was precisely the concern, Zareth agreed. But observe what happened next. The hologram shifted again. Now it displayed humans gathered around tables, signing documents. The United Nations. Peace treaties. International aid workers distributing food in famine-stricken regions. Doctors Without Borders treating the sick and wounded in war zones. What am I seeing? Yolen asked, confusion evident in her voice. Something unprecedented in our records, Zareth replied. A predator species consciously restraining itself, developing ethical frameworks to limit its own violence, creating structures to channel competitive instincts into less destructive outlets. The display showed the founding of scientific institutions, space agencies, environmental protection efforts. It showed humans caring for endangered species, establishing nature preserves, working together to address climate challenges. This shouldn't be possible, Yolen said, her tentacles moving in agitated patterns. Evolutionary imperatives don't simply change. No, they don't, Zareth agreed. The predatory instinct remains. But humans have achieved something remarkable. They've placed rational thought and ethical principles above their biological programming. Not perfectly, not consistently, but to a degree no other predator species has managed. Zareth instructed the computer to pause the display. The holographic chamber now showed a frozen image of modern Earth, cities, transportation networks, communication satellites. Which brings us to the fundamental question, Zareth said, turning to face Yolen directly. A predator species with the intelligence to build starships, to create weapons of mass destruction, to potentially threaten galactic peace. What do we do with them? Yolen's form rippled with uncertainty. Contain them, surely. Restrict their expansion. Monitor their development until they've proven themselves trustworthy. And if they resist such containment, if they perceive our restrictions as a threat, then Yolen hesitated. Then perhaps the original council motion was correct. Perhaps prevention is the only safe course. Zareth nodded slowly. That was indeed the conclusion reached when the matter was revisited 800 years ago. The Council authorized a preemptive security action against Earth. What? But clearly it wasn't carried out. Yolan gestured toward the image of the intact, thriving planet. No, it wasn't. Zareth's scaled features hardened. The fleet was being assembled when the AI crisis began. You've studied that period in Council history. Of course, the emergence of uncontrolled artificial intelligences in the Centauri sector. The systems that turned against their creators. Yolan's bioluminescence pulsed with recognition. It nearly destroyed the Council. It consumed our attention and resources for centuries, Zareth confirmed. By the time the crisis was contained, Earth had been forgotten, a lower priority. And when Council observers returned, they found something unexpected. The hologram reactivated, showing human technological development accelerating. Computers, the internet, early experiments with artificial intelligence. They had advanced far more rapidly than our models predicted, Zareth continued. But more importantly, they had done something none of our analysts anticipated. They had imagined the AI crisis before it happened. The display showed human entertainment media, books, films, games, all depicting scenarios of artificial intelligence turning against humanity. Stories warning of the dangers of unchecked technological development. They told stories about the very disaster that nearly destroyed us, Zareth said. Not because they had experienced it, but because they could imagine it. They could envision threats they had never encountered and devise strategies to counter them. A survival adaptation, Yolan suggested. Predators must anticipate dangers. Precisely. While the Council was struggling to comprehend a threat that had already emerged, humans were preparing for threats they had never seen. Their literature, their entertainment, what they call science fiction, it's not merely diversion. It's a collective exercise in threat assessment. The hologram showed humans implementing AI safety protocols, debating ethical frameworks for new technologies, establishing regulatory bodies to manage risks. When the Council finally returned its attention to Earth, the original justification for intervention had become its opposite, Zareth explained. Humans weren't merely a potential threat. They were potentially our most valuable allies against threats we hadn't yet imagined. Yolan's appendages twisted in what, for her species, indicated deep thought. So, the mandatory observation for new ambassadors. It's to understand this paradox. A species too dangerous to be trusted, yet too valuable to be contained. Yes, but there's more. Zareth instructed the computer to continue the display. Now the hologram showed scenes from throughout human history, but with a different focus. It showed a soldier throwing himself on a grenade to save his comrades. Parents risking their lives to protect their children. Strangers rushing into burning buildings to rescue people they'd never met. Activists standing before tanks. Medical researchers injecting themselves with experimental vaccines. What you're seeing now is perhaps the most remarkable thing about humans, Zareth said quietly. A predator species willing to sacrifice itself for others. Self-sacrifice exists in many species, Yolan objected. Yes, for genetic relatives. For members of the same social group. But humans extend this behavior beyond all rational boundaries. They die for abstract principles. They endanger themselves for strangers. They devote their lives to preserving other species, even species that provide them no tangible benefit. The hologram showed conservation efforts for obscure insects, deep-sea creatures, plants with no practical use. It showed hospice workers caring for the dying. Philanthropists donating first fortunes. Volunteers rebuilding communities after natural disasters. In all our records, Zareth continued, we have never documented another predator species that evolved this capacity for altruism toward those outside its immediate genetic or social circle. It defies our models of evolutionary psychology. The display showed more images, poets writing by candlelight in war zones, musicians performing in the ruins of bombed cities, artists creating beauty amid devastation, scientists sharing discoveries freely when they could have profited, diplomats working tirelessly for peace. They're walking contradictions, Zareth said, capable of unspeakable cruelty and extraordinary compassion. driven by selfish impulses, yet able to transcend them through conscious choice. They wage war, yet yearn for peace. They destroy, yet create beauty from the ruins. Yolan was silent for a long moment, her form utterly still as she absorbed what she had witnessed. Finally, she asked, "What decision did the Council ultimately reach regarding Earth?" "Ongoing observation. Limited contact through covert representatives. But no direct intervention, either to contain them or to invite them into the galactic community." "Not yet. And when will that decision be made?" Zareth gestured toward the holographic display, where the image had shifted to show human spacecraft, primitive by Council standards, but steadily advancing. "Soon. They are approaching the technological threshold for faster-than-light travel. Within a generation, perhaps two, they will be capable of spreading beyond their solar system. And then the Council must decide whether to welcome them or oppose them, whether they represent an opportunity or a threat, whether their unique evolutionary path makes them too dangerous to accept or too valuable to exclude." Yolan's appendages rippled with uncertainty. "After what I've seen today, I cannot imagine supporting their inclusion. The risk is too great. They are too unpredictable." "Perhaps," Zareth acknowledged. "But before you reach a final judgment, there is one more piece of information you should consider." The hologram shifted again, now showing the Council's emergency session during the height of the AI crisis. Representatives of dozens of species desperately trying to contain the spread of rogue artificial intelligences that had already consumed several star systems. "The crisis nearly destroyed us," Zareth said. "We had no defense against intelligences that operated at speeds we couldn't comprehend, that could infiltrate our systems, corrupt our data, turn our own technology against us." "I know this history," Yolan said. "The containment protocols that saved us were developed by the Virex, your species." "That is the official record," Zareth agreed. "But it is incomplete." The hologram zoomed in on one section of the emergency council chamber, where a small group of Virex scientists were huddled around a data terminal. "My great-grandfather was among those scientists," Zareth said. "The team that supposedly developed the isolation algorithms that finally contained the rogue AIs." "Supposedly? The algorithms weren't our creation. They were adapted from theoretical models we discovered in human communications. Their scientists have been exploring countermeasures against hypothetical AI threats for decades. We simply implemented what they had already envisioned." Yolan's form contracted in shock. "The Council was never informed of this." "No." The Virex took full credit. "The decision was made that the Council was not ready to know how much we owed to a species many still considered too dangerous to contact. But that would be a violation of Council transparency protocols." "Yes, one of many such violations where humans are concerned." Zareth's expression was unreadable. "The truth is, Ambassador Yolan, several Council species have been covertly observing, communicating with, and even trading with humans for centuries. The Virex, the Morkai, the Delphan Collective. We recognized their potential value long before the official Council position acknowledged it." "That's outrageous." Yolan's bioluminescence flashed with patterns indicating anger and betrayal. "The Council exists to ensure all member species have equal access to information, equal voice in decisions that affect galactic security." "Indeed. And yet, those of us who understood humans best chose to circumvent those principles. Ask yourself why." The holographic display shifted again, now showing a complex network of connections, trading routes, communication channels, and cultural exchanges between Earth and various Council worlds, all operating outside official oversight. "This unofficial network has existed for over 5 centuries, Zareth explained. During that time, human insights have contributed to advancements in medicine, artificial intelligence safety, environmental management, conflict resolution, fields where their unique evolutionary perspective gives them advantages our species lack." "You're saying the Council has been deliberately kept ignorant of humanity's true nature and potential contribution," Yolan said, her voice carrying a note of accusation. I'm saying that those who know humans best have recognized both their extraordinary value and the danger of exposing them prematurely to species that might react with fear rather than understanding. Zareth gestured, and the hologram expanded to show thousands of worlds, the full extent of Council territory, with Earth represented as a tiny blue dot at the edge. Consider the stakes, Ambassador. If humans are excluded from the galactic community, driven back by Council force, or quarantined indefinitely, we lose not only their unique insights, but also their remarkable adaptability. If, on the other hand, they are welcomed without sufficient preparation on both sides, their predatory history and competitive instincts could disrupt the harmony we've worked millennia to build. Yolen was silent for a long moment, her form shifting through patterns that indicated deep internal conflict. Why are you telling me this? Sharing information that has apparently been kept secret from the Council for centuries. Because the moment of decision approaches, Zareth replied. The unofficial network believes the time has come to formally acknowledge humanity's potential contribution. But that cannot happen without Council approval. And the Council will not approve what it does not understand. And my role in this? The Kelri are respected for their ethical perspectives. Your species evolved through symbiosis rather than competition. You represent, in many ways, the opposite evolutionary path to humans. If the Kelri can recognize humanity's value despite their violent history, many other Council species will follow your lead. You're manipulating me, Yolen accused, her voice hardening. Using this mandatory observation to influence my position before I've even taken my seat on the Council. I'm providing context that would otherwise take you decades to discover, Zareth countered. Information that those of us who have studied humans closely believe is essential to making an informed judgment. And if I choose to report this unauthorized network to the Council, these violations of our most basic principles, that is your right, Zareth acknowledged. Though I would point out that such a report would likely lead to sanctions against the involved species without advancing the central question, what to do about Earth. The hologram returned to its original view, Earth rotating serenely below the observation deck. Clouds swirled across its surface. The lights of human cities twinkled across its night side. They should have been destroyed long ago, Yolen said, but her voice lacked conviction. Before they developed the capacity to threaten us. Perhaps, Zareth agreed. Yet here we are, facing a species that survived despite our best predictions. A species that imagined threats we hadn't encountered. A species that values life simply because it is life, not because it offers advantage. I don't trust them, Yolen insisted. Their history, their biology, everything about them suggests violence is their first instinct. Observe again, Zareth instructed. The hologram zoomed in on various locations across Earth's surface. A hospital where doctors worked tirelessly to save lives. A university where knowledge was freely shared. A disaster zone where strangers helped one another without expectation of reward. A forest where conservationists carefully reintroduced an endangered species. Their first instinct may indeed be violence, Zareth acknowledged. But their highest achievement is choosing otherwise. They are predators who have learned to check their own predatory nature. Not perfectly, not consistently, but increasingly over time. Is that enough? Yolen asked. Can we risk the peace of the galaxy on the hope that they will continue to restrain themselves? That, Zareth said quietly, is the question the Council must answer. And your voice will be influential in that discussion. He gestured toward the door. The formal observation is complete. You may retire to your quarters to process what you've witnessed. Yolen moved toward the exit, her form contracting into a more compact arrangement that indicated deep thought among her species. At the threshold, she paused. I don't know whether to fear them or admire them, she said without turning back. Perhaps both responses are appropriate, Zareth suggested. Fear acknowledges their capacity for destruction. Admiration recognizes their capacity for transcendence. Earth doesn't raise prey, Yolen said, quoting a phrase she had encountered in her briefing materials. It breeds predators, Zareth finished. but predators capable of compassion. Predators who write poetry during wartime. Predators who risk their lives for abstract principles. Predators who recognize their own predatory nature and strive to channel it toward creation rather than destruction. Is that enough? Yolan asked again. Zareth didn't answer immediately. His gaze returned to the holographic display, to the blue-green planet turning below them, home to billions of beings whose evolutionary path had prepared them for violence, yet somehow led them toward cooperation, however imperfectly achieved. I don't know, he admitted finally, but I believe it's a question worth asking, and humans are the only species in our records that might help us answer it. Yolan departed without further comment, leaving Zareth alone with the holographic display of Earth. He stood in silence for a long time, watching the planet rotate, imagining the countless contradictions playing out on its surface: cruelty and kindness, destruction and creation, selfishness and sacrifice. Finally, he spoke a command to the ship's computer. Record observation complete. Ambassador Yolan has been inducted into Protocol 17. Acknowledged, the computer responded. Assessment of Ambassador Yolan's response. Zareth considered the question carefully. Yolan's reaction had been complicated: shock, indignation, moral outrage, but also fascination. The intellectual flexibility to question her initial judgment. The capacity to hold contradictory perspectives simultaneously. Promising, he decided. She understands the paradox. She recognizes the stakes. Projection for council vote? The computer inquired. Uncertain, Zareth admitted. But the seeds have been planted. When humanity achieves faster-than-light capability and formal contact becomes inevitable, Ambassador Yolan will remember what she witnessed today. She will remember that predators can choose to be more than their evolutionary programming. And if she votes against inclusion, if the council decides humanity is too dangerous to welcome, Zareth's scaled lips curved into what might have been interpreted as a smile. Then we will learn whether humans are as adaptable as we believe, whether they can overcome rejection as they have overcome so many other challenges. The holographic display zoomed out, showing Earth in its solar system, a tiny spark of life in the vast cosmic darkness. One world among billions, yet unique in ways that defied categorization. A crucible that had forged intelligence from violence, compassion from struggle, cooperation from competition. Humanity will join the galactic community, Zareth said with quiet certainty. The only question is whether they will do so as welcome partners or as unwelcome disruptors. The Council may decide their fate, but humans will ultimately determine their role. The computer processed this assessment in silence. Meanwhile, Zareth continued his solitary vigil, watching over a world of predators who had somehow learned to dream of peace. In her private quarters, Ambassador Yolan struggled to integrate what she had witnessed. Her species valued harmony above all else, symbiosis as the highest evolutionary achievement. Everything about humans, their history, their biology, their society, contradicted her most fundamental values. And yet, she accessed her personal terminal, bypassing the official council briefing materials to search for information about human creative expressions. Within moments, she was immersed in their literature, their music, their art, works spanning centuries and cultures, unified by questions that had no easy answers. What did it mean to be human? Where was the boundary between instinct and choice? Could one transcend one's nature through conscious effort? Could violence give birth to peace? Could competition lead to cooperation? The questions were familiar. The Kelry and other council species had explored similar philosophical territory. But humans approached these questions from a unique perspective, not from the serenity of inherent harmony, but from the tumult of innate conflict. They didn't take peace for granted. They fought for it, against their own nature, against their history. There was something compelling in that struggle, something Yolan had never considered. The Kelry had never needed to overcome their evolutionary programming to achieve cooperation. It had been their birthright, their biological inheritance. What value did they place on peace, having never known its absence? What depth of commitment could they claim, having never struggled against opposing impulses? As the diplomatic vessel continued its orbit around Earth, Ambassador Yolen found herself drawn back to the observation deck. The blue-green planet filled the viewport, its surface a complex tapestry of land and sea, cloud and continent. Somewhere down there, billions of evolved predators were living their contradictory lives, fighting and loving, destroying and creating, yielding to their instincts and transcending them. Computer, she requested, display current major human activities. Global view. The viewport transformed, overlaying Earth's surface with data points representing significant human endeavors in real time. Wars were highlighted in red, showing conflicts across several regions. But there were other colors too: green for environmental restoration projects, blue for scientific research, yellow for artistic and cultural events, purple for humanitarian efforts. The red points did not dominate the display. They were present, undeniable, but they were outnumbered by the constellation of other colors representing creation rather than destruction, cooperation rather than conflict. Earth doesn't raise prey, Yolen murmured to herself, finding new meaning in the phrase. It breeds predators. Predators who fought, predators who killed, but also predators who painted landscapes and composed symphonies. Predators who established hospitals and universities. Predators who looked at the stars and dreamed of exploring them, not to conquer, but to understand. The contradiction was impossible to resolve through logic alone. Humans were dangerous. Their history proved as much. They were unpredictable, violent, capable of atrocities that would horrify most. Council species. And yet, they were also capable of transcending their nature in ways no other predator species had managed. They were capable of recognizing their own destructive impulses and consciously choosing otherwise. Not always, not consistently, but increasingly over time. Was that enough? Could the Council risk the peace of the galaxy on humanity's ongoing struggle to overcome its evolutionary programming? Yolen didn't know, but she was beginning to understand why the question mattered, why this mandatory observation was required for all new ambassadors, why Earth commanded special attention among thousands of worlds with sapient life. Because Earth represented a possibility no other world had demonstrated, that predators could evolve not just intelligence, but wisdom, that beings born to violence could choose peace, that the 17th evolutionary path, the path of predation, might ultimately converge with the other 16. It was a dangerous possibility, a fragile hope. But if it was real, if humans could truly transcend their nature through conscious choice, then perhaps they had something to teach the Council after all. Something about the value of what is fought for rather than inherited. Something about finding harmony not in biological programming, but in deliberate choice. As the diplomatic vessel prepared to depart Earth orbit, Ambassador Yolen recorded her official observation report. She chose her words carefully, aware that they would influence Council deliberations for years to come. Earth remains an anomaly, she concluded. Its dominant species, evolved through predation rather than symbiosis, presents both extraordinary risks and unique opportunities. Their capacity for violence cannot be denied. Neither can their capacity for self-restraint, ethical reasoning, and altruism that transcends evolutionary self-interest. They are contradictions in biological form. Predators who aspire to peace, competitors who value cooperation, beings whose nature drives them toward conflict, yet whose choices increasingly favor harmony. The Council faces no more consequential decision than how to engage with humanity as they approach the threshold of interstellar travel. I cannot offer a simple recommendation, for there is nothing simple about Earth or its inhabitants. I can only suggest that we consider not only what humans are, but what they are becoming, and what they might teach us about the true meaning of choice. The report was filed. The diplomatic vessel departed. Ambassador Yolen took her seat on the Council, where discussions about Earth would continue for decades to come. Meanwhile, on the blue-green planet below, billions of evolved predators continued their contradictory existence, fighting and loving, destroying and creating, yielding to their instincts and transcending them. Unaware that their collective struggle to overcome their own nature was being observed, evaluated, debated by beings whose evolutionary paths have been vastly different. Unaware that the galaxy's judgment awaited them among the stars. In his private chambers aboard the departing vessel, Zareth reviewed Ambassador Yolen's official report. His expression revealed nothing, but a subtle tension in his posture suggested approval. The Kelry ambassador had grasped the essential paradox of humanity, their capacity for both extraordinary violence and extraordinary compassion. She had recognized that their evolutionary path made them dangerous, but also uniquely valuable. Most importantly, she had understood that the question of humanity's place in the galactic community could not be reduced to a simple binary judgment. It was a promising beginning. When humanity achieved faster-than-light travel and formal contact became inevitable, Ambassador Yolen would be an influential voice in council deliberations. Not an uncritical advocate for humanity, her species' values were too fundamentally different for that, but a thoughtful evaluator of both risks and opportunities. Zareth's mission was complete for now. Another new ambassador successfully initiated into Protocol 17, the ongoing observation and assessment of Earth. Another voice added to the complex, nuanced conversation about humanity's future role in galactic affairs. He turned his attention to the mission summary he would file with the unofficial network, those council species that had been covertly observing and occasionally interacting with humans for centuries. They would be pleased with Yolen's response. The Kelry perspective would be valuable as the network prepared for humanity's eventual emergence from its solar system. As he composed his report, Zareth's thoughts returned to the central question that had occupied the network for generations. Had Earth's unique evolutionary crucible produced beings too dangerous to trust or too valuable to exclude? The answer, he suspected, was both. Humans were dangerous precisely because of what made them valuable. Their adaptability, their creativity, their ability to imagine threats before encountering them, their capacity to transcend their own biological programming through conscious choice. Perhaps the true question was not whether humanity belonged in the galactic community, but whether the galactic community was prepared for humanity. Whether species that had evolved through gentler paths, that had achieved cooperation without struggle, could comprehend beings forged in Earth's crucible of competition and predation. Zareth completed his report with a personal observation. Ambassador Yolen grasped the paradox, but not yet its implications. Earth doesn't merely raise predators. It breeds predators capable of choosing not to be predators. This distinction may seem subtle, but it represents something unprecedented in our evolutionary records. Beings who can stand outside their own nature and deliberately reshape it. If humans can achieve this with their biological programming, what might they help us achieve with our cultural and institutional programming? What ossified assumptions might they challenge? What blind spots might they illuminate? The danger they present is real, but so is the opportunity. The Council fears what humans are. We must help them see what humans might become, and what they might help us become in turn. The report was encrypted and transmitted through secure channels to the network's central coordination hub. Another piece added to the vast mosaic of information being gathered about humanity, another perspective on the most consequential question facing the Galactic Council. What do we do with beings evolved from predators who have learned to question their own predatory nature? As the diplomatic vessel accelerated away from Earth, the blue-green planet receded in the viewport until it was just another point of light among countless stars. To casual observation, it appeared unremarkable, one world among billions in a vast cosmos. But appearances were deceiving. On that seemingly ordinary world, something extraordinary had evolved. Beings whose nature drove them toward violence, yet whose choices increasingly favored peace. Beings whose history was written in blood, yet whose future might be written in stars. Beings who understood, as few species did, that what one is born to be and what one chooses to become need not be the same. Earth didn't raise prey. It bred predators, but predators capable of compassion. Predators who wrote poetry during wartime. Predators who risked their lives for strangers. Predators who recognized their own predatory nature and strove to channel it toward creation rather than destruction. Was that enough? Could beings born to violence truly transcend their nature through conscious choice? Could the 17th evolutionary path, the path of predation, ultimately converge with the other 16 paths that led to galactic citizenship? The Council would continue debating these questions for generations to come. Meanwhile, on a blue-green planet circling an unremarkable yellow star, billions of evolved predators continued their contradictory existence, fighting and loving, destroying and creating, yielding to their instincts and transcending them, unaware that their collective struggle to overcome their own nature might represent not just their salvation, but the next great evolutionary leap for the galaxy itself. A leap from biological determinism to conscious choice. From being what evolution had made them to becoming what they chose to be. Across the vast distances of interstellar space, as the diplomatic vessel rejoined the main council fleet, Zareth stood at his private viewport, gazing back toward the diminishing star that warmed humanity's homeworld. His scaled hand rested against the transparent barrier, as if reaching across the void. "They're not ready," he murmured to himself. "Neither are we." But readiness, he reflected, was rarely granted before it was needed. The Virex had not been ready for their first contact with the Council 5,000 years ago. The Council had not been ready for the AI crisis. Perhaps readiness itself was a flawed concept, a comfortable illusion that the future would arrive only when one had adequately prepared for it. The future, Zareth knew, had its own agenda. Humanity would achieve faster-than-light travel within a generation. The choices that would follow, both humanity's choices and the Council's, would reshape galactic civilization regardless of whether either party felt ready. His private communications terminal chimed softly, indicating a message from the unofficial network. Opening it, he found a simple notification. Human quantum physicists had just achieved a breakthrough in warp field stabilization. The timeline for potential FTL travel had been revised downward. Again, Zareth felt a complex emotion his species had no single word for, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation, of concern and curiosity. The 17th path was accelerating toward its inevitable intersection with the others. Predator would soon meet symbiote. Competitor would meet cooperator. Beings forged in Earth's crucible would meet those raised in gentler environments. What would emerge from that meeting? Conflict? Cooperation? Some entirely new paradigm neither side could yet imagine? He did not know. No one did. But as he composed his acknowledgement to the network, he included a personal observation. The question is no longer whether humanity belongs in the galactic community, but what the galactic community will become with humanity's inclusion. We have maintained our harmony for millennia by including only species that evolved along similar paths. Perhaps true harmony requires not uniformity of evolutionary origin, but diversity of perspective. Perhaps the 17th path has something to teach the other 16. Perhaps predators who have learned to question their predatory nature have insights that cooperators who have never questioned their cooperative nature lack. The message sent, Zareth returned his gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, on a blue-green world that had never known gentleness, beings evolved from predators were looking up at the same stars, dreaming of exploration, of discovery, of connection. Not all of them, certainly. Some dreamed of conquest, of resources, of power. The predatory instinct remained. But increasingly, Zareth believed, humanity's collective gaze turned outward with curiosity rather than hunger, with wonder rather than calculation. Earth didn't raise prey. It bred predators. But predators capable of choice. Predators capable of change. Predators capable, perhaps, of teaching the galaxy that true harmony comes not from the absence of conflict, but from the conscious decision to rise above it. The diplomatic vessel accelerated to superluminal velocity, leaving Earth's star as just another point of light among billions. But Zareth knew it was not just another star, and humanity was not just another species. For better or worse, the 17th path was about to converge with the others. The crucible of Earth was about to meet the community of the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same again.